The rain hammered against the windows of the small cottage as Sarah Jenkins wiped her hands on her apron. She had been working as a housekeeper for wealthy families her entire life, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Her new employers, the Whitfield family, had just purchased the old estate that once belonged to someone very important. They didn't know exactly who, but the paperwork showed it had royal connections. Sarah's daughter, Emma, curious 22-year-old with a passion for history, had begged to come along today. Emma worked part-time at a local museum and had an eye for spotting valuable antiques. The Whitfields were away on vacation, and Sarah thought it would be the perfect time to do a thorough cleaning of the property. The estate was massive, with sprawling gardens and a main house that seemed to hold secrets in every corner. But what caught Emma's attention was the old garage at the back of the property. It looked different from the rest of the buildings, more secure, with thick metal doors and what appeared to be an electronic lock system. "Look at this," Emma called out, running her fingers along the garage door. "This isn't just any ordinary garage. See these cameras? And this lock system looks really expensive." Sarah walked over, her cleaning supplies still in hand. She had noticed the garage before, but never paid much attention to it. The Whitfields had mentioned that the previous owners left everything behind, including whatever was in the garage. They had the codes to everything, but hadn't bothered to check what was inside. "The Whitfields said we could clean everywhere," Sarah reminded her daughter. "They gave me all the access codes. They want the whole property spotless before they move in properly." Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. She had always been the adventurous type, the kind of person who couldn't resist a mystery. What if there's something amazing in there? Something historical? We should at least take a look. Sarah hesitated for a moment. She was a responsible woman who took her job seriously. But the Whitfields had been clear. Clean everything. Check everything. Make sure nothing was damaged or dangerous. Technically, they were just doing their job. "Right," Sarah agreed, pulling out the piece of paper with all the access codes. "But we're just checking to see what needs cleaning." Nothing more. Emma practically bounced with excitement as Sarah punched in the code. The electronic system beeped, and they heard the heavy locks clicking open. The metal door was heavier than expected, and it took both of them to pull it open. What they saw inside made them both gasp and step backward. The garage wasn't just a garage. It was like stepping into a different world. The space was much larger than it appeared from the outside, clearly renovated and expanded. Beautiful hardwood floors stretched across the room, and the walls were lined with expensive-looking wood paneling. Soft lighting automatically came on as they entered. But it wasn't the renovation that shocked them. It was what filled the space. Cars, but not just any cars. These were vehicles that Emma recognized from her museum work and history books. A pristine Rolls-Royce that looked like it came from the 1950s sat in the center, its silver paint gleaming under the lights. Next to it was what appeared to be a vintage Bentley, and beyond that, several other luxury vehicles that looked like they belonged in a royal collection. "Oh my goodness," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "Emma, these cars? They look expensive," Emma finished, but her voice carried a different tone. She was staring at something else entirely. Along the walls were glass display cases, and inside those cases were items that made her heart race. Photographs. Lots of them. But these weren't ordinary family photos. These were professional photographs, the kind taken at important events. Emma moved closer to get a better look, and what she saw made her grab her mother's arm. "Mom," she whispered urgently, "look at these photos." "Really? Look at them." Sarah joined her daughter at the display case. Inside were dozens of photographs showing official ceremonies, elegant parties, and what appeared to be royal events. The photos were beautifully framed and appeared to be signed, but it was the people in the photos that made their hands shake, in photo after photo. You could see a familiar older man and woman. The man was tall and distinguished, often wearing military uniforms or formal suits. The woman was elegant, always perfectly dressed, with a warm smile that seemed genuine in every picture. "These people," Sarah said slowly, "they look so familiar." Emma was already pulling out her phone. Comparing what she was seeing to images she found online, her face went pale as she looked back and forth between her phone screen and the photographs in the display case. "Ma'am," she said, her voice shaking with disbelief, I think these are photos of King Charles and Camilla. Real photos. Personal photos." Sarah felt her knees go weak. "That's impossible, Emma. How could ... But as they looked around the garage with fresh eyes, everything began to make sense. This wasn't just someone's car collection. This was a personal space, a private retreat that had been carefully maintained and protected. The security, the electronic locks, the beautiful renovation, it all pointed to something much more significant than they had imagined. Emma noticed something else that made her heart pound even faster. In one corner of the garage, there was a small office area with a beautiful wooden desk. On that desk were more personal items, books, letters, and what appeared to be official documents. "We need to look closer," Emma said, though her voice carried both excitement and nervousness. "If this is really what I think it is, this could be the discovery of a lifetime." Sarah looked at her daughter, then back at the incredible space they had stumbled into. She knew their lives were about to change forever, but she had no idea just how much. Emma's hands trembled as she approached the wooden desk in the corner of the garage. Her background in museum work had taught her to handle historical items with extreme care, but this felt different. This felt personal and almost forbidden. "We should be careful," Sarah warned, though her own curiosity was getting the better of her. "We don't want to damage anything." Emma nodded and carefully opened the first drawer of the desk. Inside, she found leather-bound journals with handwritten entries. The handwriting was elegant and precise, clearly from someone well-educated. As she carefully lifted one of the journals, a loose photograph fell out. The photo showed the same distinguished man from the wall displays. But this time he was in casual clothes, working in a garden. He was smiling genuinely, dirt on his hands, looking completely relaxed and happy. On the back of the photo, someone had written Charles Highgrove Garden, Spring 2019. "Ma'am," Emma whispered, showing Sarah the photo. "This is definitely King Charles. But look how normal and happy he looks. This isn't a formal royal photo. This is personal." Sarah studied the image carefully. She had seen the king on television countless times, but never like this. "If these are real personal photos, Emma, what are they doing here? How did the previous owners get them?" Emma continued exploring the desk, finding more journals and loose papers. Many of the documents appeared to be personal letters, written in the same elegant handwriting. She carefully read a few lines from one letter that was lying open. "My dearest," the letter began, "the time we spend at this little retreat means more to me than all the formal ceremonies and official duties. Here we can just be ourselves, away from the cameras and the constant attention. The garage has become our sanctuary, where we can enjoy simple pleasures, working on the cars, reading quietly, sharing stories without the weight of protocol." Ma's eyes widened as she continued reading. "This place wasn't just owned by someone connected to royalty, Mum. This was actually used by them. As a private retreat." Sarah moved to examine the cars more closely. Now that she looked with greater attention, she noticed small personal touches everywhere. In the Rolls-Royce, there were books on the passenger seat and what appeared to be handwritten notes on the dashboard. The Bentley had a small bouquet of dried flowers hanging from the rearview mirror. "Look at this," Sarah called out, pointing to a small plaque mounted near the Rolls-Royce. The plaque read, "In appreciation of 30 years of faithful service. CR 2023. Emma joined her mother by the cars. CR could mean Charles Rex. That's how the king signs official documents. But 30 years of faithful service to who? And why is this plaque here?" They began to notice more details that had escaped their attention initially. Each car had small personal items inside, reading glasses, newspapers, even a thermos that still smelled faintly of tea. This wasn't a museum display or a collection meant for show. These were vehicles that had been used regularly and personally. Emma moved back to the photograph displays, studying them more carefully. Now she could see that many of the photos showed the same location where they were standing. The garage itself appeared in several images, but it looked different in the photos, more lived in, with chairs and tables that weren't there now. "These photos show this exact place," she told her mother excitedly. "Look, you can see the same wood paneling, the same layout, but in these photos, there are people using the space." having tea, reading, even playing cards. In one particularly touching photograph, they could see King Charles and Camilla sitting together at a small table, both reading books, with several dogs lying at their feet. The image captured a moment of perfect domestic tranquility. Sarah found herself getting emotional looking at the photos. They looked so peaceful, so normal. Like any married couple enjoying quiet time together, Emma discovered another drawer in the desk that contained what appeared to be guest books. She carefully opened one and found pages of signatures and messages from various visitors. Some of the names were ones she recognized from news reports, politicians, celebrities, and other members of the royal family. One entry particularly caught her attention. It was dated just 6 months ago and read, "Thank you for sharing this magical place with us. In a world where privacy is impossible, you have created something truly special. With love and gratitude, William and Catherine." "Mom," Emma said, her voice filled with awe, "Prince William and Princess Catherine have been here too. This isn't just King Charles and Camilla's retreat. This is a place where the whole royal family comes to escape." As they continued exploring, they found evidence that the garage retreat had been used regularly for years. There were maintenance records for the cars, receipts for groceries delivered to the address, and even scheduling notes for private weekends. Sarah noticed something that made her heart race. Near the entrance, there was a small security panel with a list of names and phone numbers. At the top of the list was emergency contact. Clarence House, followed by a phone number she recognized from news reports. "Emma," she said quietly, "I think we need to understand what this means. If this really was the royal family's private retreat, when the Whitfields bought this property without knowing, what are we supposed to do with this information?" Emma was staring at a calendar hanging on the wall. It was current, with dates marked for the past several months. The last entry was marked just 2 weeks ago. "Final cleanup, C&C departure," I think Emma said slowly. The royal family was still using this place until very recently. Maybe they had to sell the property for some reason, or maybe they just decided to give it up. But judging by these dates, they were here just before the Whitfields bought it. The realization of what they had discovered was starting to sink in. This wasn't just a collection of royal memorabilia or a historical site. This was a deeply personal space that had been actively used by the royal family as their private sanctuary. Sarah sat down heavily in one of the chairs. "Emma, what do we do now? Do we tell the Whitfields? Do we contact someone? These items, these photos, these personal things, they don't belong to the new owners, do they?" Emma looked around the garage one more time, taking in the full scope of what they had found. "I don't know, ma'am, but I think we've stumbled onto something much bigger than either of us could have imagined. This could change everything for a lot of people." Emma was examining the beautiful wood paneling along the walls when she noticed something unusual. One section of the wall looked slightly different from the rest. The wood grain didn't quite match, and when she pressed her hand against it, it felt less solid than the surrounding panels. "Come look at this," she called out, running her fingers along the edge of what appeared to be a hidden panel. "I think there's something behind this wall." Sarah joined her daughter, and together they examined the suspicious section more closely. Emma remembered reading about secret passages in old estates during her museum training. Many wealthy families throughout history had built hidden rooms for various purposes. "Feel along the edges," Emma suggested. "There might be a hidden mechanism or button." Several minutes of careful searching. Sarah pressed what felt like a small wooden knob disguised as part of the decorative carving. They heard a soft clicking sound, and the panel swung inward, revealing a hidden doorway. "Oh my goodness," Sarah breathed, peering into the darkness beyond. "There's another room back here." Emma used her phone's flashlight to illuminate the hidden space, and what she saw made her gasp. The secret room was smaller than the main garage, but just as carefully designed. However, this space felt even more personal and intimate than what they had already discovered. The hidden room appeared to be a private study or library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with hundreds of books on topics ranging from architecture and gardening to philosophy and history. Comfortable reading chairs were positioned near a small fireplace, and a beautiful antique writing desk sat beneath a window that had been carefully concealed from the outside. "This is incredible," Emma whispered as they stepped into the room. "It's like a private sanctuary within a sanctuary." What struck them most was how lived in this space felt. There were books lying open on tables, reading glasses left on chair arms, and even a half-finished cup of tea sitting on the desk. Someone had been using this room very recently. Sarah moved to examine the books while Emma focused on the writing desk. Many of the books had personal bookmarks and handwritten notes in the margins. She pulled out one volume on sustainable farming and saw extensive notes written in what she now recognized as King Charles's handwriting. "Emma, these aren't just books for show," Sarah said, her voice filled with wonder. "Someone has actually read all of these, studied them, made notes. Look at this one about environmental conservation. There are detailed notes about specific projects and initiatives." Emma had made an even more remarkable discovery at the writing desk. The desk drawers contained what appeared to be drafts of speeches, personal letters, and detailed plans for various charitable initiatives. Everything was in the same elegant handwriting they had seen throughout the garage. "Ma'am, listen to this," Emma said, carefully reading from one of the draft speeches. "This appears to be an early version of a speech about climate change that King Charles gave last year. But look at all the personal additions and changes he made by hand." The speech draft showed extensive revisions, with passionate additions about the urgency of environmental action and personal appeals for immediate change. The handwritten notes revealed a depth of genuine emotion and concern that had been polished away in the final public version. Sarah discovered a collection of personal correspondence that took her breath away. These weren't official royal letters, but deeply personal communications between King Charles and various environmental scientists, farmers, and conservation experts from around the world. One letter, dated just 3 months earlier, was from a young farmer in Kenya who had written to thank the king for personally funding a water conservation project. The farmer's letter was heartfelt and grateful, describing how the project had saved his family's farm and provided water for his entire village. King Charles's handwritten response, still sitting in the desk, was equally moving. He wrote about his deep personal commitment to helping farmers worldwide and his belief that environmental conservation was not just a political issue, but a moral imperative that affected real people's lives. "Emma," Sarah said, tears forming in her eyes, "these letters show a side of King Charles that the public never sees. He's been personally funding projects and helping people all over the world, without any publicity or recognition." Emma had found something that made her hands shake with excitement. Hidden in the back of one drawer was a leather portfolio marked "Personal Projects, Private." Inside were detailed plans and photographs documenting dozens of charitable initiatives that King Charles had funded personally. Separate from his official royal duties, the projects ranged from building schools in rural Africa to supporting young artists in inner cities. From funding medical research to helping preserve historical sites, each project file contained before and after photographs, personal letters from beneficiaries, and handwritten notes about the impact these initiatives had made. "This is extraordinary," Emma whispered. "He's been running what amounts to a private charity empire, using his own money and personal time to help people, and he's kept it all secret." One project file particularly moved them both. It documented King Charles personally funding the education of over 200 children whose parents had died in natural disasters around the world. The file contained school photos, report cards, and heartfelt letters from children writing to thank Uncle Charles for giving them hope and opportunity. Sarah found herself crying as she read letter after letter from young people whose lives had been transformed by the king's personal generosity. These weren't official royal charity events with photographers and publicity. These were quiet, personal acts of kindness that had been kept completely private. Emma discovered another section of the hidden room that contained what appeared to be personal artwork and crafts. There were watercolor paintings of gardens and countryside scenes, all signed simply C. The paintings weren't masterpieces, but they showed genuine talent and a deep love of nature. Next to the paintings were hand-carved wooden items, small animals, decorative boxes, and even furniture pieces. Everything was beautifully crafted and clearly made with great care and patience. He made all of these himself, Emma realized, examining the intricate carving work. This room shows us hobbies and talents that no one knows about. He's an artist, a craftsman, a private philanthropist. The most touching discovery came when Sarah found a collection of personal journals dating back over 20 years. The journals contain not royal duties or official thoughts, but deeply personal reflections about life, family, responsibility, and the weight of public service. One entry, written during a particularly difficult period in royal family history, revealed the king's private struggles with balancing personal happiness with public duty. His words showed a man who deeply cared about his family and his country, but often felt torn between the two. Reading these, Sarah said softly, makes him seem so human, so real. The public sees the formal speeches and official appearances, but here we see his actual thoughts and feelings. Emma looked around the hidden room one more time, overwhelmed by what they had discovered. Mum, this room contains the real King Charles. Not the public figure, not the formal monarch, but the actual person. His real interests, his private charity work, his personal struggles and joys. They both stood in silence for a moment, realizing that they had uncovered something far more precious than valuable antiques or historical artifacts. They had found the private heart and soul of a man who had devoted his entire life to service, even when no one was watching. As Emma and Sarah continued exploring the secret room, they discovered another hidden compartment behind one of the bookshelves. When Emma accidentally leaned against what appeared to be a fake book spine, an entire section of the bookshelf rotated inward, revealing a climate-controlled storage area. "This place just keeps getting more amazing," Emma said, her voice filled with awe. Inside the hidden storage area, they found carefully preserved items that told the story of a lifetime devoted to meaningful causes. The first thing that caught their attention was a collection of handmade gifts that had been sent to King Charles from children around the world. There were drawings, paintings, hand-knitted scarves, and wooden carvings, each accompanied by a touching letter. What made these items special wasn't their artistic value, but the fact that every single gift had been carefully preserved and displayed with obvious love and respect. Sarah picked up a crayon drawing of a garden made by a 7-year-old girl from Australia. The accompanying letter, written in a child's careful handwriting, thanked King Charles for making the world more beautiful with your flowers below. The letter was a handwritten response from the king himself, thanking the child for her artwork and encouraging her to keep drawing. He personally responded to a drawing from a child, Sarah marveled. Can you imagine how much that meant to that little girl? Emma discovered an entire wall dedicated to what appeared to be mementos from the king's personal travels. But these weren't official state visit souvenirs. These were personal items collected during private moments. A pressed flower from a garden in Scotland, a smooth stone from a Welsh beach, a piece of driftwood from a quiet morning walk. Each item was carefully labeled with the date and location, along with a brief note about why it was special. One label read, "Shell found during early morning walk with Camilla, Cornwall, July 2022. Discuss plans for new environmental initiative. Perfect morning." These simple objects revealed a man who found deep meaning in quiet moments and natural beauty, someone who treasured peaceful times away from the demands of public life. Sarah found a section dedicated to personal letters from other members of the royal family. These weren't formal communications, but intimate family correspondence that showed the loving relationships behind the public facade. One letter from Prince William expressed gratitude for his father's guidance during a difficult period in his own public service. The letter was filled with respect, love, and appreciation for the king's wisdom and support. William's words painted a picture of a father who had carefully prepared his son for the responsibilities of royal life while maintaining a close personal relationship. Another letter from Princess Catherine thanked King Charles for his support during her early years in the royal family. She wrote about how his kindness and understanding had helped her navigate the challenges of public life, and how his example had inspired her own charitable work. Emma discovered a collection of personal photos that were even more intimate than those displayed in the main garage. These photos showed quiet family moments, grandchildren playing in gardens, informal family dinners, and candid moments of laughter and joy. One photo particularly touched them both. It showed King Charles sitting on the floor, completely absorbed in building a toy castle with what appeared to be one of his grandchildren. Both the king and the child were covered in wooden blocks and completely focused on their project. The photo captured a moment of pure joy and connection. "Look how happy he looks," Emma observed. "Just being a grandfather, playing with blocks on the floor. This is the side of him that the public never sees." Sarah found something that made her understand the true depth of King Charles's character. Hidden in a special drawer were copies of personal financial records showing decades of private charitable donations. The amounts were staggering. But more impressive was the consistency and variety of the causes he supported. The records showed regular monthly donations to hundreds of small charities around the world. Environmental groups, educational programs, medical research, arts organizations, and local community projects had all received quiet, consistent support over many years. "Emma, look at this," Sarah said, her voice filled with amazement. "He's been giving away millions of his own money every year, and most of these donations were made anonymously. No publicity, no recognition, just quiet generosity." One donation record particularly moved them. Every month for the past 15 years, King Charles had personally funded a program that provided musical instruments to underprivileged children in inner-city schools. The program had no royal patronage, no public association with the monarchy, just consistent funding that had allowed thousands of children to learn music. Emma discovered a collection of personal thank you letters from people whose lives had been changed by the king's anonymous generosity. A young woman wrote about how a scholarship he provided had allowed her to become a doctor and return to help her rural community. A veteran thanked him for funding a program that helped former soldiers start small businesses. Each letter showed the real-world impact of the king's private philanthropy, touching individual lives in meaningful ways that extended far beyond official royal charity work. They found evidence of personal relationships that King Charles had maintained with ordinary people from all walks of life. There were Christmas cards from farmers he had helped, birthday wishes from students he had supported, and updates from families he had assisted during difficult times. One correspondence particularly stood out. For over 20 years, King Charles had maintained a friendship with an elderly woman in Wales who had lost her husband in a mining accident. Their letters showed a genuine friendship based on mutual respect and caring, with the king regularly checking on her well-being and offering both emotional and practical support. Sarah found a journal entry that brought tears to her eyes. In it, King Charles wrote about the responsibility he felt to use his privilege and position to help others, even when no one would ever know about it. He reflected on how true service meant giving without expectation of recognition or reward. "The greatest satisfaction," he had written, "comes not from the public ceremonies or formal duties, but from knowing that I have quietly helped someone achieve their dreams or overcome their struggles." This is the real purpose of any position, of privilege, to lift others up, especially when no one is watching. Emma looked around the storage area, overwhelmed by the scope of what they had discovered. "Ma'am, this collection shows us a man who has spent his entire adult life quietly helping others. Not for publicity, not for political gain, but because he genuinely believes it's the right thing to do." The hidden room contained decades of evidence showing King Charles as a private philanthropist, a devoted family man, an environmental activist, and a person who used his resources and influence to make the world a better place, often without anyone knowing about his efforts. "No wonder this place was so important to them," Sarah said softly. "This wasn't just a retreat from public life. This was where they kept the record of their real life's work, the work that mattered most to them personally." As they prepared to leave the hidden storage area, both women realized they had discovered something far more valuable than royal artifacts or historical items. They had found evidence of a life devoted to service, kindness, and genuine care for others, conducted quietly and without fanfare over many decades. Emma and Sarah sat quietly in the hidden room, surrounded by the evidence of decades of private kindness and service. The weight of their discovery was beginning to settle on them both. They had stumbled upon something that could change public perception of the royal family forever. but they also understood the deeply personal nature of what they had found. "We need to decide what to do with all of this," Sarah said finally, her voice heavy with the responsibility they now carried. "These aren't just historical artifacts, Emma. These are deeply personal items that belong to real people who trusted this place to keep their secrets safe." Emma nodded, looking around at the journals, letters, and personal mementos that surrounded them. "I keep thinking about that little girl who sent the drawing, or those children who received the musical instruments, or that woman in Wales who's been writing to him for 20 years. All of these people trusted that their personal connections would remain private." They had been in the garage complex for over 3 hours, and the magnitude of their discovery was both thrilling and frightening. Sarah understood that their next decision would affect not just their own lives, but potentially the lives of many others. "We could contact the newspapers," Sarah said, though her voice showed she wasn't really considering this option seriously. This story would be worth millions. The private charity work, the personal letters, the secret retreat, it would be the biggest royal story in decades. Emma shook her head firmly. "But at what cost?" "We'd be destroying something beautiful and private. All those children who wrote letters, all those people who were helped quietly, they'd suddenly find their personal stories splashed across every newspaper in the world." They both understood that selling this story would solve their financial problems forever. Sarah worked as a housekeeper because she needed every penny to support her family. Emma's job at the museum barely paid enough to cover her expenses. The money from this story could change their lives completely. But as they looked around the room, it's filled with evidence of anonymous kindness. Neither woman could bring herself to seriously consider betraying that trust for personal gain. "What about the Whitfields?" Emma asked. "They own the property now. Don't they have a right to know what they've purchased?" Sarah had been thinking about this too. The Whitfields were a young couple who had bought the estate as their dream home. They had no idea they had also purchased what amounted to a private royal sanctuary. "They're good people," she said. "But if they knew what this was, they might feel pressured to publicize it or sell it. Can you imagine the circus this place would become?" Emma walked over to one of the personal journals and carefully read another entry. In it, King Charles had written about how precious it was to have one place in the world where he could be completely himself, without cameras, without protocol, without the constant awareness that every word and action would be analyzed and criticized. He wrote that this place saved his sanity during some of the most difficult periods of his life, Emma told her mother. When the media pressure was overwhelming, when family situations were complicated, when the weight of public expectations felt unbearable, he could come here and just be a normal person. Sarah found herself thinking about her own need for privacy and quiet spaces. Everyone deserved a place where they could be themselves without judgment or scrutiny. "Even kings need somewhere to be human," she said softly. They spent another hour carefully going through everything they had discovered, not to take anything or expose secrets, but to understand the full scope of what this place had meant to its previous occupants. The evidence showed that the royal family had used this retreat regularly for over 2 decades, creating memories and finding peace away from public life. Emma discovered a guest book that contained entries from various members of the royal family, all expressing gratitude for having access to this peaceful sanctuary. Prince William had written about bringing Catherine here during their early courtship, describing it as the only place where we could just be ourselves without the world watching. This place has been part of their family history for decades, Emma realized. Abandoning it must have been incredibly difficult for them. Sarah found a recent letter that explained why the royal family had decided to give up their beloved retreat. Rising security costs and increased media attention in the area had made it impossible to maintain the privacy that made the place special. Rather than risk exposure, they had made the difficult decision to sell the property and erase all evidence of their connection to it. The letter, written by King Charles to Camilla, expressed deep sadness about losing their sanctuary, but also relief that they had managed to keep it private for as long as they had. He wrote about hoping that the new owners would find the same peace and happiness in the property that they had enjoyed for so many years. "They chose to give this up rather than risk having it exposed," Sarah said, her voice filled with respect for that decision. They protected not just their own privacy, but the privacy of everyone who had shared personal moments with them here. Emma looked at her mother with determination. "I know what we need to do." They spent the next 2 hours carefully returning everything to exactly the way they had found it. Every book was placed back in its original position. Every photograph was restored to its proper place. And every personal item was returned to where it belonged. They documented nothing. They took no photographs, made no copies, and removed nothing from the property. Instead, they carefully cleaned and maintained everything with the same respect they would show to items in a museum. "But what do we tell the Whitfields?" Sarah asked as they prepared to close the hidden room. What they knew would be the last time. Emma had already thought about this. "We tell them that the garage contains some valuable vintage cars and what appears to be a collection of historical photographs. We suggest they might want to have experts appraise everything before deciding what to do with it." "That's the truth," Sarah agreed. "We're just not telling them the whole truth." They reset all the security systems and carefully closed the hidden panels, making sure everything was sealed exactly as they had found it. If the Whitfields chose to explore further and discovered the secret room themselves, that would be their choice. But Emma and Sarah would not be the ones to expose decades of private family history as they finally prepared to leave the garage. Emma took one last look around. Someday, historians might discover this place and learn about the private side of King Charles's life. But that should happen naturally, not because we chose to expose it for money. Sarah felt proud of her daughter's wisdom and integrity. "Sometimes the most valuable thing you can find is something you choose not to take," she said. They locked the garage and walked back toward the main house, carrying with them a secret that would change how they thought about privacy, service, and the true meaning of integrity. They had discovered something priceless and chosen to protect it rather than profit from it, understanding that some treasures are more valuable when they remain hidden. 6 months had passed since Sarah and Emma's extraordinary discovery in the garage. Life had returned to normal on the surface, but both women carried the weight and wisdom of their secret in ways that had quietly transformed their lives. Sarah continued working as a housekeeper for the Whitfield family, who had settled into their new home with great happiness. The young couple had indeed discovered the vintage cars in the garage and had hired experts to appraise the collection. Just as Emma had predicted, the appraisers confirmed that the vehicles were valuable classics. Though they found no specific documentation about their previous ownership, the Whitfields decided to keep most of the cars, enjoying them as part of their new country lifestyle. They converted part of the garage into an entertainment space for hosting friends. Never knowing that they were using what had once been a royal sanctuary, their joy in the property brought Sarah satisfaction, knowing that the space continued to bring happiness to people. Even if in a different way, Emma had been promoted at the museum. Her newfound perspective on the importance of protecting historical privacy, earning her recognition from her supervisors. She had developed a specialty in handling sensitive historical collections, understanding better than most the delicate balance between historical preservation and personal privacy. The secret they shared had brought Sarah and Emma closer together. They often talked about their discovery, not dwelling on what they had given up financially, but marveling at what they had learned about integrity, service, and the hidden goodness that exists in the world. "I think about those letters from the children almost every day," Emma often told her mother. "Knowing that kind of quiet generosity exists makes me want to find ways to help others in my own life." Sarah had been inspired to start a small anonymous scholarship fund at Emma's old school. Using her savings and small contributions from friends, she provided help to students whose families were struggling financially. She never put her name on the program, remembering how King Charles had chosen to give without recognition. "The best gifts are the ones where no one knows who gave them," Sarah would say. Echoing the philosophy they had discovered in that hidden room, their decision to protect the royal family's privacy had unexpected consequences in their own lives. Word had somehow spread in their small community that Sarah and Emma were people who could be trusted with sensitive information. Several elderly residents began asking Sarah to help them organize their own personal papers and family histories, knowing she would treat their memories with respect and discretion. Emma found herself becoming a confidant for people who wanted to donate historical items to the museum but were Concerned about maintaining family privacy, her reputation for discretion made her the go-to person for sensitive acquisitions. One day, Sarah received an unexpected visitor at the Whitfield estate. A well-dressed gentleman introduced himself as a private secretary working for a charitable foundation. He had heard about Sarah's discreet scholarship program and wanted to discuss ways the foundation might provide anonymous support for her efforts. Represent donors who prefer to give quietly, he explained. Your approach to helping students without seeking recognition aligns perfectly with our foundation's philosophy. Sarah never learned the identity of the donors, but the foundation's support allowed her scholarship program to help dozens of additional students over the following years. She often wondered if there might be some connection to their discovery, but she never asked questions that might compromise anyone's privacy. Emma received her own surprise several months later. The museum was contacted by an anonymous donor who wanted to fund a new position focused on protecting the privacy rights of historical subjects. The donor specifically requested that Emma be offered the position. Having heard about her commitment to ethical historical preservation, the new role allowed Emma to develop policies that balanced public education with personal privacy, ensuring that historical collections would be managed with the same integrity they had shown in that garage. Her work became a model for other museums dealing with sensitive historical materials. As time passed, both women began to understand that their decision to protect the royal family's privacy had created ripples of positive change in their own lives and their community. By choosing integrity over profit, they had attracted opportunities to do meaningful work that aligned with their values. Sarah often thought about the journal entry where King Charles had written about the satisfaction of helping others without recognition. She now understood that feeling personally, finding deep joy in the students she helped through her scholarship program. Even though they would never know her name, Emma regularly encountered visitors at the museum who had been inspired by stories of anonymous generosity to make their own quiet contributions to various causes. She began to believe that there were many more people like King Charles in the world. People doing good work without seeking credit or recognition. On the first anniversary of their discovery, Sarah and Emma returned to the Whitfield estate for a routine cleaning visit. They walked past the garage, now transformed into a bright social space where the Whitfields hosted dinner parties and community events. "Do you ever regret our decision?" Sarah asked her daughter as they paused outside the building that had changed their lives. Emma smiled. Watching through the windows as the Whitfield children played with their friends in what had once been a royal sanctuary. "Never," she said firmly. "We found something much more valuable than money in that garage. We found proof that goodness and generosity exist in the world, even in places where we don't expect to find them." They discovered that protecting someone else's privacy and dignity had opened doors to opportunities they never could have imagined. Their choice to keep the royal family's secret had led them to lives filled with purpose and meaning. Besides, Emma added with a grin, "we have the most incredible secret in the world. We know that somewhere out there, King Charles and Camilla are probably creating new memories in a new private space, continuing their quiet work of helping others." As they walked back to the main house, both women carried themselves with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've made the right choice, even when it was difficult. They had learned that the most valuable treasures are often the ones you choose to protect rather than claim, and that true wealth comes from living with integrity rather than simply accumulating money. Their extraordinary discovery had taught them that real nobility comes not from titles or positions, but from the choice to use whatever resources you have to help others, especially when no one is watching. In keeping that lesson alive in their own lives, they had ensured that the legacy of what they found in that garage would continue to create positive change for years to come. The secret they shared would remain safe forever, but its impact would ripple outward through every life they touched, every student they helped, and every person they inspired to choose kindness over personal gain. In the end, that legacy proved to be worth far more than any amount of money they might have gained by exposing what they had found.